Anti-derivative Jill.
I'm anti-derivative Jill, and joining me on this epic journey is Tygerstripes.
Hello.
Yes, hello.
Hey.
Hello and welcome to A Journey Through Middle-earth, Book 1, Chapter 11, A Knife in the Dark. We kind of make a left turn in terms of the story, and we talk about Buckland.
Yes, Frodo's
Yeah.
house in Buckland. And poor fatty Bolger.
He's invaded by the Black Riders. There are 3 of them.
I don't know if there's 3 or 4, because there's a first shadow figure that opens and closes the gate. Why would you close it again? That confuses me.
Even if they're evil, they're still polite? I have no clue. It doesn't make sense.
I can't quite work that one through.
Open in the name of Mordor. Among the trees, a horn rang out.
They are beating on the door. There was a blow, soft but heavy, and the door shuddered. At a second blow, the door yielded and fell back, with timbers burst and lock broken. The black figures passed swiftly in.
That's when the horn rang out. Fatty, as soon as he saw those dark shapes, he ran out and he sounded the alarm.
Actually, I don't think it's Fatty blowing the horn. He just reaches somebody else and, falls apart. At some point, they get the idea that enemies were in Buckland, some strange invasion from the Old Force, and then they lost no more time. And then the Brandybucks blow the horn call of Buckland. So Fatty makes it to somebody's house. Good old Fatty. I feel bad for him.
That horn had not been sounded for 100 years, not since the White Wolves came. And that causes the black figures to flee from the house. Good work, Fatty.
Yes, good old Fatty. And you get a kind of a writer's eye view of this scenario here, because there's a hubbub and the horses are riding by and there's horns blowing and voices crying and feet running, but the Black Riders rode like a gale to the north gate. Let the little people blow. Sauron would deal with them later. Meanwhile, they had another errand. They knew now that the house was empty and the ring had gone. They rode down the guards at the gate and vanished from the Shire.
Yes, now they know that the thing they're seeking is not there. Going on.
An interesting little change of scene.
It is.
Yes, to go back to Buckland from Bree, right at the beginning of the chapter. Poor Fatty Bolger. He did not sign up for that.
Strider is still awake in his chair as Frodo wakes up. Frodo does have a feeling, though. The Black Riders know Frodo left the Shire. Aragorn wakes the other hobbits, and they go to the hobbit bedroom, the hobbit room, and find that the windows have been broken and everything's been destroyed. So very lucky they did not sleep there.
Oh, yes.
The brown mat was torn to pieces, bolsters slashed, but no one ever heard a sound. So if the hobbits were there, they would have been taken without anybody even hearing it. They want to get off quickly. Strider doesn't want a breakfast. A hobbit would never say no breakfast.
Never.
But the ponies were gone. The ponies vanished, and now this stops them from leaving sooner than they want to. They try to see if there were any ponies they can buy.
Yes, and the only one they can find belongs to that sneering, brutal owner, Bill Ferny, who ups the price on them, and they have to pay 12 silver pennies. Why would you call something that was silver a penny? But nonetheless, it's 12 silver pennies.
Fortunately, Butterbur pays for the pony, even though he might be at a loss because all these ponies were seemingly stolen. But luckily, they actually just all ran away, and he'll be fine. He'll actually get his money back. And this is good news for the hobbits, actually, that they, even though it's sad they lost their ponies, they're happy they can have some breakfast. Aragorn's worrying about provisions, and so it takes them 3 extra hours to get out of town. And they wanted to, and they have to do it out in the open, so everybody in town knows they're leaving. They wanted to leave without anybody knowing. Can't do that. I do like that it tells us what happened to Mary's ponies. Mary's ponies had escaped altogether, and eventually, having a good deal of sense, they made their way to the downs in search of Fatty Lumpkin. So they came under the care of Tom Bombadil for a while. But when news of the events at Bree came to Tom's ears, he sent them to Mr. Butterbur.
This is something that's actually from Tolkien's Christmas stories, I believe. I'm not certain of that. This is by Tolkien himself, but it's interesting that it's just sort of a window, a room, a conventional curtain, but then this really distressing thing at the top, almost like an elongated hand or some sort of bat or bird hovering eerily. Makes me think of the riders coming into that room to murder the hobbits, and then the normality of the room, and then this thing. But that's Tolkien's own hand.
Hobbits leave Bree at 10 a.m. and everybody's talking about it, about the Frodo's disappearing and the Black Riders.
The whole town's turned out to watch them go off. They're hanging out of windows watching them.
They just march off on the road because why not? Everybody knows what's going on. And they walk past Bill Ferny's house. Sam was chewing on an apple thoughtfully. He had a pocket full of them. A parting present from Nob and Bob. Apples for walking and a pipe for sitting.
But Bill Ferny himself is outside on the other side of the hedge, smoking and sneering and spitting.
Could you read that for me?
Sure. Over the hedge, another man was staring boldly. He had heavy black brows and dark, scornful eyes. His large mouth curled in a sneer. He was smoking a short black pipe. As they approached, he took it out of his mouth and spat. "Mornin', Longshanks," he said. "Off early? Found some friends at last?" Strider nodded but did not answer. "Morning, my little friends," he said to the others. "I suppose you know who you've taken up with. That's Stick-it-not Strider, that is, though I've heard other names not so pretty. Watch out tonight. And you, Sammy, don't go ill-treating my poor old pony." He spat again. Sam turned quickly. "And you, Ferny," he said, "put your ugly face out of sight, or it will get hurt." With a sudden flick, quick as lightning, an apple left his hand and hit Bill square on the nose. He ducked too late, and curses came from behind the hedge. "Waste of a good apple," said Sam regretfully, and strode on. I have a note on that. While I understand Sam's impulse here, in my experience, it's never a good thing to humiliate an enemy. It can sharpen the focus of their hate and give them something to remember down the road in the future.
That's true. It's not quite wise to do, but I'm sure it felt good.
I'm sure it felt wonderful.
They're leaving Bree behind them. We're doing more walking. So they follow the road for a little while, and then they get off the road. "This is where we leave the open to take cover," said Strider. "Not a shortcut, I hope," said Pippin. "Our last shortcut in the woods nearly ended in disaster." "Ah, but you had not got me with you then," laughed Strider. "My cut's short or long. Don't go wrong."
That's such a comfort. That's just what you want to hear from somebody leading you through the wilderness.
Exactly. And so they make their way to Weathertop, but it takes quite a while.
Yes, this image I have is a little premature. I wish I had another one. I wish I had one of them crossing the marshes.
Oh, right. Actually, since we're leaving Bree, I got to leave Bree in my back. So shows just how far they're walking. It's just the world has expanded too much. I couldn't find a smaller map. So we go from Bree to Rivendell. And so this is the whole expanse that they have to get through. They're going to Weathertop. Where are the marshes?
The marshes are just pretty much the other side of Bree.
And of course, Weathertop right there is their destination. It'll be high enough for them to see where they need to go. And so they get to the Midgewater Marshes.
It's a beautiful day, and the fox they pass has no thoughts to share with us. So
yes. The reason why they do pass fox at all is because of Strider's skill, or for some other reason they saw no sign and heard no sound of any other living thing that day except birds and except one fox and a few squirrels. Yeah, too bad this fox wasn't opinionated.
I don't know. You do that more than once, then every fox you pass is going to have opinions. So.
I'm okay with this. Because otherwise we're in this miserable location. It's definitely uncomfortable for the hobbits. The marshes are treacherous. There are flies bugging them. "I'm being eaten alive," cried Pippin. "Midgewater. There are more midges than water."
"What do they live on when they can't get hobbit?" asked Sam, scratching his neck.
Oh, no. And then you have to camp there? Oh, this is terrible. Why are we here?
And the bugs, and Sam calls the cricket-like sound makers knickerbreakers. And it's funny because I have used that expression for decades without quite remembering that's where I got it from.
Oh, really? That's
yes, whenever
hilarious.
there's locust or crickets, something going on loudly all night, I'm like, knickerbreakers. It's Sam.
Yes, the flies began to torment them. The air was full of clouds of tiny midges that crept up their sleeves and breeches and into their hair. It just feels so gross.
Oh, yeah. And I don't know that we have midges the way they have midges in England. These are like tiny biting insects. They bite. I haven't ever experienced anything. I mean, I've been eaten alive by mosquitoes, but it's not the same. They have a
Right.
bite and you feel it when they bite you.
This is also a point where I don't want to bore my listeners too much because there's a lot more navigation. But Strider sees Weathertop, the last straggling poles, and reads them. Oh, thank goodness.
It takes them 3 days to cross the marshes.
Yeah, so they leave the marshes and they can see Weathertop at the distance. And then there's another danger. I didn't even think about that. Strider says not all the birds are to be trusted. So even birds can be spies, and there can be other spies.
Even more evil than they are.
And he says Sam looked up at the hawks, fearing to see hawks or eagles. You do make me feel uncomfortable and lonesome, Strider. So all that day they plodded along. I think that describes the next few pages here. So they come to a stream that wandered down from the hills, and Strider, it seemed, did not sleep at all.
Pippin notices that Frodo is looking twice the hobbit that he had been. Very odd, said Frodo, tightening his belt, considering that there is actually a good deal less of me. I hope the thinning process will not go on indefinitely, or I shall become a wraith. Do not speak of such things, said Strider quickly, and with surprising earnestness.
Why is he worried about that joke?
I think that when something's looking for you, when you call it by name, it hears. You know what I mean? If it's looking for you, and it's almost like a Voldemort thing. It's almost like an enchantment.
So if you speak of it, then it could happen.
Yes. If you speak of it, it could hear you. And that is what the Nazgul are. They're wraiths.
Yes. It was the night of the 5th of October, and they were 6 days out from Bree. So they've been walking for 6 days. They left the Chetwood.
And Strider's leading them along a very cunning track that seems to have been made to keep travelers out of view.
I wonder who made this path and what for, said Mary.
Mary says that it feels like the Barrows, and he knows his history on this area.
Yes, he says this path was made to serve the forts along the walls. In the first days of the North Kingdom, they built a great watchtower on Weathertop, and nothing remains of it now but a tumbled ring. Some elves remember having gone there. Oh, and so this is what it originally looks like.
Well, that's a very nice visualization. I picture it mentally as quite more crumbling than that. I love the travel posters for Middle-earth. It was burned and broken, and nothing remains of it now but a tumbled ring, like a rough crown on the old hill's head. Yet once it was tall and fair. I don't think that Strider's that old, but he's been told the stories.
Yes, he's been told by elves who are that old, who remember being there.
Yes, and it is his history.
And he sings a song of it. Gil-galad was an elven king, and where he dwelleth none can say, for into darkness fell his star in Mordor where the shadows are.
Yeah, this is actually Sam reciting the lay.
And when Bilbo got to the part about Mordor, I stopped learning. I didn't want to learn that part of it. This is what he eventually said. Going to Mordor, cried Pippin. I hope it won't come to that.
Do not speak that name so loudly, said Strider.
Again, the thing, the place that shall not be named.
He knows they're there, and they're not far from them, the riders. That just the invocation of Mordor would probably be enough to sort of get them to sit up and go, what? Yes?
That's really creepy that they could feel that someone's talking about them. At the base of Weathertop.
And it takes half an hour to get to the top.
And
they leave Sam and Pippin with the pony and their packs and luggage at the bottom, but Frodo and Merry follow him all the way to the top.
And they do find a wide ring of ancient stonework that's crumbling. It's also looked like it's been blackened as if with fire in the middle of the ring. There's evidence of kind of confrontation.
And Strider finds a flat rock with a G rune and 3 scratches made recently on it. And he deduces that it likely relates to the lights they saw in the sky 3 days before, and that since they were so hastily made, Gandalf must have been in a hurry and danger was at hand. So the G rune stands for Gandalf, and the 3 stands for October the 3rd.
3 days ago. And that's when Strider guesses he was attacked on the hilltop. And so they still need to make, no matter what happened to Gandalf, they need to make their way to Rivendell. We have at least a fortnight's journey before us, for I do not think we shall be able to use the road. Frodo sees 2 black specks moving. moving along it, going westward, and looking again, he saw that 3 others were creeping eastward to meet them. He gave a cry and clutched at Strider's arm. They spotted the enemy. They spotted the
Strider
riders.
recognizes them for what they are because his eyes are very keen.
And so they go to find Sam, Merry, and Pippin. And they found, Sam and Pippin found some footprints.
Traces of a fire and a nice little stack of firewood.
Yes, and they think that that's evidence that Gandalf was here.
And Strider's really interested, but like a grumbling detective, he's unhappy because Sam and Pippin trampled the ground and spoiled the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
But he thinks that it's rangers who left the firewood.
Yes.
Although there's a newer set of tracks not made by rangers, but made by heavy boots. Maybe more than one set of boots. And Strider really considers it and decides that they probably couldn't find a better place to make camp. They're in a little dell. They probably have a hill behind them. The firewood is there. It's clearly a place people have camped before. Rangers have camped before. So it's probably a good place to defend yourself.
Yes, and also the fact that Black Riders do not like fire. Also, Sam makes a good point. It also tells them exactly where we are.
And Merry says, "Can the riders see?" And I get where Merry's coming from. Strider made them lie down flat when he spotted the riders in the distance. But now Strider talks about being seen. And Strider says, "It was a mistake for the 3 of us to go up and stand on Weathertop for so long, for the black horses can see, and the riders can use men and other creatures as spies, as we found at Bree. They themselves do not see the world of light as we do, but our shapes cast shadows in their minds, which only the noon sun destroys, and in the dark they perceive many signs and forms that are hidden from us. Then they are most to be feared. And at all times they smell the blood of living things, desiring and hating it. Also," he added, and his voice sank to a whisper, "the ring draws them." Ooh.
Yes, there's that super smell that they have, and also definitely they're connected to that ring from their rings.
Yes, and people, anything other than a rider, can feel their presence. He says, "We can feel their presence. It troubled our hearts as soon as we came here, and before we saw them, they feel ours more keenly." Which is, what a thought. As much as they can tell that the riders are present and in the area, the riders so much more know that they are there.
Yes, that is why they do confront them here. Okay, so there's a lot of talking about food. Of course, they have to eat.
Yay!
"I don't see how our food could be made to last," said Frodo. "There's food in the wild," said Strider. "Berry, root, and herb, and I have some skill as a hunter at need." So he can feed them. And it won't be a lot, but it'll be enough to survive. So tighten your belts and think with hope of the tables of Elrond's house.
And it gets colder and darker, and they're huddled around the fire.
Strider's smoking, and he's telling stories about the elves and men and the good and evil deeds of the elder days. And
they have a nice
sings.
Visual here of him that could be fireside in that moment, with the bowl of stars behind him.
Strider tells the tale of Tinuviel.
Beren and Tinuviel.
Yes, a love story.
Yes, because like most people, Strider is attracted to art that reminds him of himself. And these 2 characters' story is so similar to his and Arwen's story.
It is, definitely, because there's an elf here who gives up her mortality to be with him, which is, just like you said, a parallel to our Aragorn and Arwen. If you can, it's a little bit of a long tale. It's here in the text. It's a good one.
There's a point at some point when Tolkien was a young man where his wife, before they were married, danced for him in a woodland.
Oh, wow.
I think he held that memory very close and dear all his life.
He saw the elven flowers spring about her feet, and healed again. He longed by her to dance and sing upon the grass untroubling. And so you're saying Tolkien had this experience?
I think so. I think they were young and they were in love, and they had to wait to be married. But at some point, she danced for him, and I haven't really looked into that. I would like to. There was a return to what people at the time assumed was naturalism in dance. And so the ladies wore togas like the Greeks and short, dresses like they imagined the Greeks and the Romans did. And then there was a style of dance like Isadora Duncan did, and the women after her. That was, lots of leaping and arms. And I don't know that's what she did, I don't know what kind of dance she did for John, but there was something that definitely he remembered all his life.
And it's interesting history, too. Beren was a mortal man, but Luthien was the daughter of Thingol, a king of elves upon Middle-earth when the world was young. Yet at last Beren was slain by the wolf that came from the gates of Angband, and he died in the arms of Tuniviel, but she chose mortality. And that's the part that I realized, yes, this is like Arwen. Elrond of Rivendell is of that kin, so he's family to this story. Lots of history here, lots of world building.
Mm-hmm.
And at last the two overcame the great enemy and stole one of the three Silmarils, which is the elf cut jewel from his crown. And Beren used this jewel for Tinuviel's hand in marriage. But then Beren was killed by a wolf, and Tinuviel chose mortal life so she could die with him. But Arwen chooses mortal life so she could be with Aragorn and have a family. I already know we're going to come up on a scene in the next chapter where I'm like, oh, well, I wish Arwen was here. Why do we have
A lot of
Why do we have to meet Glorfindel?
And Aragorn's story is in the appendices. It's not spelled out in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But it is in the appendices, so I think Tolkien understood that people really wanted to know. I expect people wrote him letters. I think that a lot of the appendices were sort of based on the questions that people had for him.
So it's starting to get late, and Frodo's feeling cold, dread. There were 3 black shapes. They seemed to be moving this way. 3 or 4 tall black figures were standing there on the slope looking down on them. And this is where terrors overcoming Merry and Pippin, and they threw themselves flat on the ground. Sam shrank to Frodo's side. Frodo was hardly less terrified than his companions. He was quaking as if he was bitter cold, but his terror was swallowing up in a sudden temptation to put on the ring. He did not forget the barrow, nor the message of Gandalf, but something seemed to be compelling him to disregard all warnings, and he longed to yield, not with the hope of escape or of doing anything, either good or bad. He simply felt that he must take the ring and put it on his finger. And he does. He was able to see beneath their black wrappings. There were 5 tall figures, 2 standing, and their white faces burned keen and merciless eyes. In their haggard hands were swords of steel. Their eyes fell on him and pierced him. Desperate, he drew his own sword, and it seemed to him that it flickered red, as if it were a firebrand. 2 of the figures halted. The third was taller than the others. His hair was long and gleaming, and on his helm was a crown. In his one hand he held a long sword, and in the other a knife. Both the knife and the hand that held it glowed with a pale light. He sprang forward and bore down on Frodo. At that moment Frodo threw himself forward on the ground, and he heard himself crying aloud.
And he heard himself crying aloud, "O Elbereth, Gilthoniel." At the same time he struck at the feet of his enemy. A shrill cry rang out in the night, and he felt a pain like a dart of poisoned ice pierce his left shoulder. Even as he swooned, he caught, as through a swirling mist, a glimpse of Strider leaping out of the darkness with a flaming brand of wood in either hand. With a last effort, Frodo, dropping his sword, slipped the ring from his finger and closed his right hand tight upon it.
And I realized we just basically read the entire last couple pages.
Well, they are so strong and important. What a mess he made of it in putting that ring on. And clearly he couldn't stop himself. You know,
He was terrified. He had no control.
Yeah, he couldn't even really meet Sam's eye, you know, from just the desire to put the ring on. I guess he was afraid of the shame that he might see.
As afraid as he was still courageous enough to use his dagger.
Yes, and call out Albereth and Gilthoniel, which I think made a difference. I feel like that was why he survived, because otherwise why wouldn't? Well, I mean, Strider was there with the fire, which certainly made a difference.
Frodo made a difference too, striking the Nazgul and making it shriek. He also gave as good as he got.
Yes, but poor Pippin and Merry throw themselves flat on the ground, as inevitably Frodo does too. The terror is really hard to stand up to, hard to take.
And
they're really coming for you.
Yeah, and then he finally takes the ring off. They're not just lurking around anymore.
Yes, he even makes the effort to strike at the rider, at the Witch King.
And that's chapter 11. This one was just about being on Weathertop, and this is just
getting there and the attack, which is huge. That's a big deal.
That's all for now, and we're going to continue our quest. Stay tuned.
Namarie.
This is the end. I'm going now. I bid you all a very fond farewell.